what about REST APIs? You heard of them? You guys use them? Okay. So I'm gonna show you guys what GraphQL is, and it's probably the coolest alternative to REST APIs. It makes life so much easier, especially if you're like the only developer or like a small group, because then there's less maintenance and stuff, and I'm gonna show you why that is. So GraphQL, and at the end of showing you like what GraphQL is and everything, I'll show you an example that I did in Node.js and React. So yeah, GraphQL. So we got REST APIs. You got an endpoint for like everything. Like okay, so in this example that I have here, I made a movie website, and let's say I want to, like a database, right? Let's say I want to get movies. There's an endpoint for movies, so the website's gonna ask the backend for the movies, and it'll return all the information, a whole list of movies with all their information, everything about the movie. Then we got users. It'll give me a list of all the users of the website, their information, and something else could be favorite movies, a user's favorite movies, etc. So yeah, we have 3 endpoints in a REST API. So for those, wait, you guys know what an API is, right? Just so I can explain what it is. You guys don't know. So yeah, basically a server far, far away that you could ask information for and show it onto your website. So some issues with REST APIs is that there's underfetching. What that means is, like, say I want to get information about a movie, but I also want to get information about a user, and maybe the user's favorite movie or movies. It could take 3 different requests to do that. 1 request to get the movies, 1 request to get the user, and maybe another request to get the favorite movies. And that could be a little expensive for the server. It could be a little expensive, it could bog things down. And this is called underfetching because we're not getting enough data. We have to make 3 different requests to get the data that we need. So, it's pretty annoying. It could get pretty annoying to do all of that. And then another issue we have is overfetching. We get too much information. So in REST API, let's say we want to get information about, the movies. We're gonna get, like, let's say we want the movie's title, we want its genre, the year it was released. But in a REST API, usually we're gonna get everything, more than we need. We could get its ID, the title, the year, the genre, the description, rating, length, poster URL, like the image, favorite count. It's too much information. I don't need all of that. And that could also be like, it could use up a lot of resources when it's not really necessary. When all we need is the title, the year, and the genre. That's all we need. We don't need any of that. So that's overfetching. We're getting too much information, man. So yeah. So what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language for reading and changing API data, like a REST API. GraphQL provides a type system which allows us to create schemas for data, so like the shape of the data, what the data should look like. REST APIs don't really provide that much. You just make requests, and that's it. GraphQL makes it easier to do things because you're making schemas, which schema is the shape of the data, like a schema for a movie has, it has the title, description, etc. Everything that a movie has. It makes it much easier for us to explore and read the data that we need. So it's basically more user-friendly for the front end or the client to read and get data, and change data too. And like I said, it's an alternative to REST APIs, and it was made by Facebook. Meta.
Is it still considered like an API itself?
API is basically, an API is like pretty much the whole server. The API is the whole computer. This GraphQL is like a tool for getting information from the API. So that's pretty much what that is. Any questions so far? Okay. So in GraphQL, unlike REST API that has a bunch of endpoints. We have one endpoint. One endpoint that we can use to get anything that we want. So that's pretty cool too. Okay, so in this example, so GraphQL has its own syntax and everything. Thank you. It has its own syntax. So this is the front end side, this is the back end side. So we use the GraphQL syntax to fetch data. So basically in this picture, the front end developer or the website describes the data that they want. So like before, we didn't want to get the whole thing, right? So in the front end, we say we want a movie. We want this movie with this ID. Every movie has its own unique ID. And we only want its title, its year, the genre, and the rating. That's all we want. We don't want anything else. And then the response from the server is going to be exactly what you asked for. So unlike in the slide before, we got like a whole bunch of crap. But with GraphQL, what you get is what you asked for, and it'll mirror the order you gave it. So I give it a year, title, genre, rating in that order, and that's exactly what I got back. So next. So for making schemas, so this is the back end. Schema, like I said, is the shape of the data, what the data should look like. So a schema for a movie, so we know a movie has a title. And so we're gonna put, it has a title, has year, has a genre, description, rating, length, etc. And these are called fields. And then next to the field, you have the type, what it should be. A title is a string. A year is an integer. A genre, well, this is a custom type. You could also put custom types, like genre. I made it so it's an enumerator, which is basically a list that it could be. It can't be anything else other than in this list. I'll show you guys more of that later. That's a little more than what I'm going to talk to you guys about. We have a description, which is a string, of course. Length is an integer, a number. And yeah, and these exclamation marks right here means that it cannot be null. If it's null, then that's a problem. It'll make an error. So, oh yeah, and these brackets right here. These brackets, this means that comments is an array of comments. It's a list of comments, which is why it's plural. And the exclamation mark means you have to return an array, and that array has to be a list of comments. So that's pretty much what a schema is. So do you guys have any questions about that? Okay, so you're basically making objects. That's pretty much what it is. Okay. Now we have a special schema or like a type called query. And basically this is what tells like the front end what you can get from the API. So in this example, in this query example, you could get a list of movies, an array of movies, or you could get a user with an argument of ID. You can pass in an ID and get the user with that ID. So basically in the type query, the backend developer makes a list of the data that you could request from the API and what it's going to return. So in this example, the front end can ask for a list of movies, like I said, or a specific user based off of their ID. And the way it gives back, the way the backend gives the data back to the user, to the front end, is through a resolver, which I'll talk to you in just a second. A resolver basically is the function in the backend that finds the data and sends it back to the user. Any questions so far? Okay. So resolver. So we have the type itself, type query, movie, user, and the argument of ID. which returns a user. This is the resolver. We're in JS land here. By the way, you could use GraphQL in just about any language, framework, and all that. And this is JavaScript, and I'm using MongoDB in this example. So this kind of mirrors the GraphQL type that you created. Right here in the resolver, we have an object called query, and inside that we have functions. So movies should match that, and basically I'm asking MongoDB, get a list of all the movies and return that list, and when you return it, that's when it sends it back to the front end, the website. And then we have a user query, which basically it'll run this function when you request a user. It'll pass in that parameter that you give, which is ID, and then MongoDB is gonna, out of the users, find one that matches the ID and return it. So that's basically a resolver. It's all the actions it's doing in order to get the data and give it back to you. So what if you want to change data or write a new data? So in REST APIs, we use methods such as post, put, patch, and delete. Have you guys heard of that and REST and all that? So we could do that with GraphQL too, except that in GraphQL, they're called mutations because you're mutating or modifying data. So just like the queries, the query type, we make it mutation type with a list of things that you're allowed to do. The list of things that you're allowed to mutate, such as, in this example, we're allowed to add a new movie to the database. Or a user could favorite a movie, which adds it to their list of favorites. So yeah. And just like queries, these also have resolvers, but for making data instead of just reading data. Any questions so far? No questions. Okay. So we got here an example with the resolver, the mutation type, and something a little extra. And I'll explain to you what this input is. It's another type of thing. So when the front end requests to make a mutation, like in this example, it's adding a movie, they send the information of the movie they want to add, such as the title, description, genre, the length, and everything. So I want to add a new movie. I'm going to tell the API the movie's called this, Shrek. It was released in 2001. It's PG and all that. So then when we give it that information, this resolver here, which is in the back end, it takes that information and asks MongoDB, hey, here's this information, add it to the database, and give it back to the user. And this input here, in the later slide, I'll show you what this is exactly. It just makes life easier. That's pretty much what it does. All right, yeah. Okay, so in the front end, basically what happens in the front end of this is, so we have the mutation. This is the request that we're making here. We want to add a movie, and this mutation takes in an input, and that's pretty much it. The input is pretty much the title, the year, description, genre, rating, length, and poster URL. And you know, I could have put this directly in here. I'm showing you what the little movie input type input thing that I made is. I could have put all this in here, but putting all that in parentheses just gets clunky and messy, if you know what I mean. You know how you have a bunch of parameters and it gets hard to read sometimes. So instead of that, we'll put it in a different, well, we could send in like a JSON or like a different object called input, and it basically goes in here. So we give it the title and all that, basically. And when we send them the request to make that movie, to add it to the database, right here, I said add movie, and when you add that movie, give me this back. Give me back the ID, the title, the year, the genre, rating, poster URL. it adds the movie to the database, and then it gives you back the information. So it gave me back exactly what I asked for. And in a REST API, it would have probably given me everything, which probably don't want. So, yeah, that's that. That's GraphQL in about a nutshell. And I have a little example that I made with GraphQL. So, let me pull that up. Okay, yeah, I made the movie database basically. So, I'm gonna show you some underfetching, overfetching examples. So, right here I asked GraphQL, the API, to give me all the movies, but I only want the title of the movie, its genre, the rating, the year, and the favorite and comment count. Now, if it was a REST API, I would have probably gotten way more than that, its description and everything. But I only got what I needed to make this page, which I'm only displaying the name, basically what I just said. So that's what I mean by fixing the problem of overfetching. So we have all these movies. Yeah. And logging in would be a mutation because you're making a new user, or I think it might be like way more than GraphQL. That's like logging in something else. But I'm gonna show you guys creating a movie. I think I kind of messed it up. I was having issues with this, man.
Classic software engineering.
What?
Classic software engineering.
For real? Okay, I think I figured it out. I might have gotten like a password wrong or something. Okay, so we got a movie. So I didn't show some of the things in the presentation, but I did add like comments. Adding a comment is a mutation. Favoriting is a mutation. Deleting a comment is a mutation. And I forgot what I was going to show with this, but this is my first project with GraphQL. I really learned GraphQL like last week. So yeah, you guys have any questions? Well, I feel like there was something I was going to show, and I just don't remember anymore. Yeah, favorite. Going to the favorite page, you ask for the list of the user's favorite movies. You know, I could have gotten all the information about the user, but instead I asked for the user's favorite movies only. That's all I want, and only the title and all that. So no more overfetching. I guess that's it. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I'll probably remember it before I fall asleep.